What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Consuming Crime. It's your host, Jules, here. So, I told you guys I'd be back. I was just watching The Ultimatum right now, which is a good segue for my other podcast, Cheese Man Chill. If you have not already heard that or checked that out, feel free to go ahead and do that. It is a pop culture podcast. Sometimes I get into politics. However, lately I've been trying to take a large breather from that side of things. Anyway, with that being said, make sure you like, subscribe, comment your opinion on some of this stuff. I love to see your guys' comments. I do try to go through them and at least like so that you guys know, like, I see you, I see your commentary, I appreciate feedback. And yeah, if you want an extra episode every single week, you can head over to the Patreon. I will be posting an extra episode every single week. It is $5 a month. I will be diving back into the series Homicide Hunter with Lieutenant Joe Kenda on Discovery Plus. That's where I left off previously. And today we're going to be going over, I believe it was the final episode of season 2. That episode is called Mr. Violence, which I will not be naming today's episode after that because I think that's a little bit glamorizing the killer, so we're not going to do that. But I will read you the description so you kind of know what we're getting into if you have not read the description of the episode. 29-year-old Chris Devoy is shot in cold blood outside a neighborhood bar. Faced with a trio of suspects, Kenda trusts his gut and makes a controversial decision. The case hits a dead end, but Kenda gets an unexpected tip that proves his instincts right. Okay, so this case most cases will throw me for a loop, but this one specifically did because there was so many theories and so many what ifs and even things that I was thinking, but we'll get into that today. All right, let me pull up my notes. So as a reminder, Joe Kenda was a lieutenant for Colorado Springs for many, many years. He solved over, I think it was 800 murder mysteries, which is A, impressive, but B, how are there that many killers in one area? That's crazy. That's crazy, because if he was a lieutenant or an officer for, let's call it 40 years, see, there's 12 months each year, that's 20 a year. That's like 2 a month, a little less, but that's a lot. So, all right, so there is a local pub in Colorado Springs called the Aaron Inn, and this is just a normal night with regulars, including 29-year-old Chris Devoy. Chris had gone to the pub with his girlfriend, Patricia Eck, and her coworker Courtney Smith. So they're all at the club having a good night. Nothing seems crazy, nothing out of the ordinary, just a regular night at the club. And this pub was known to be like to the community as like a good place. People just went to get their drinks. Nothing crazy ever really happened there. So anyway, the girls had been drinking and he was the designated driver that night. So on their way to the car, they kind of decided to call it at night at like 12:30 in the morning, and the girls were like, "Oh, we're too drunk to drive. Can you drive?" Of course, he's like. And so they get to the car, and Patricia gets into the passenger seat, Courtney gets into the back, and as Chris goes into the driver's seat, but right before he closes the door, an individual walks up and says, "Freeze," and then without even like really a pause, he just shoots him. So the girls start screaming, they're freaking out, and they run out of the car and run right back into the pub. After that, there was no attempts at shooting the girls, none of that. It was just the one shot. Girls run inside. They don't know actually they do know, because Chris had fallen into Patricia's lap, and of course she freaked out, so she kind of just like left the car. But Chris was hit. As far as where he was hit, how he was hit, if he's okay, we don't know at this point. EMTs show up on the scene shortly after this happens, and immediately Joe Kenda gets a call. What's interesting about this case is nobody had been robbed, and nobody even tried to take the car. So this almost seemed like a hit from what I was able to tell, and from what police were able to tell as well. At this point, Chris is taken into an ambulance and taken immediately to the hospital. He had been shot in the neck, and there was a lot of blood. However, he was still hanging on to his life. So he goes to the hospital, and immediately Kenda and his team start observing the scene, seeing if they can find any casings, any type of evidence. and they could not find a case or shell anywhere on the scene, which tells them that this gun was most likely a revolver, because I didn't know this prior to this episode, but apparently revolvers do not have shell casings. So they made a note of that. After this, that's when they decided to talk to the girls. They talked to Courtney, who was the girlfriend's coworker, and they were both still at the pub at this time. And Courtney, obviously, she's very distraught. She doesn't have a whole lot of information to offer. She could have been looking down. She might not have been paying all the way attention. She does say, though, that it was a man, and she said that she did see a weapon. She saw a gun. She described it as shiny, large, and there was like a circle thing in the middle. The circle thing in the middle, we're assuming, is the, what is it called? That spinny thing on the revolver. I don't know. I remember, Joe Kenda said what it was called, but I'm like forgetting in this moment. So they're thinking it's like a 36 or a 44 Magnum revolver. And after they're done talking to Courtney, they talk to Patricia, who's even more distraught because obviously this was her boyfriend. And she's crying. She's like, I don't know what happened. Can you describe the man that did this? Da, 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 da. And she goes, yes, actually, he had a ponytail. That's what I do remember. And then she immediately says, oh my God, I know exactly who it was. She said, it's Brett Maverick. He's part Native American and he was at the bar that night. And when Kenda asked her, how certain are you that this is the guy on a scale of 1 to 10, she gave him a 9. So a tiny bit of a backstory on notes that I made on Chris. So him and Patricia had been dating on and off for a couple of years now. He did just get laid off from his job recently, and he is also a father to 2 children. For some reason, I did not write down how old the children were, but I want to say they were 4 and 7. They were very young, and I believe it was a boy and a girl. So, oh yes, a 4 and a 7-year-old. He was very outgoing, lived 2 minutes from the bar, and he was generally a very kind person. So it didn't seem like there would be anybody that would want to order a hit on him. He wasn't involved in any drugs or anything like that. He could have been living a double life, but at this point, we don't know. So anyway, back to what she said about it being a man named Brett Maverick. According to Patricia, that night, Chris had been poking fun at Brett about his ponytail. And that poking fun did turn into a little bit more of a heated argument. You could tell Brett was like sick of getting poked fun of for that. They ended up exchanging some words about it. They do end up getting Brett in for questioning. And immediately Brett is not giving Officer Kenda any bad vibes, negative vibes, suspicious, nothing. He denies everything. And he even, when they ask him, will you take a polygraph? He actually agrees. And the detectives, they don't say that they do a polygraph to even see whether or not someone's being truthful. He kind of described it as they do it because they want to apply pressure. Because obviously they can't use it in court. But it's still a thing, a tool that they use when they're interrogating suspects. So as they're hooking up all of the gear onto Brett, Lieutenant Kenda gets notified that there's a lawyer waiting outside. He's like, why is there a lawyer? So he goes out and the lawyer says, I've been hired by Brett's mother to represent him in this case. And that's when, he goes and he lets Brett know. And Brett's like, I don't want a lawyer. I don't need a lawyer. I didn't do anything. I don't want to talk to him. So Kenda goes back and lets him know, he doesn't need an attorney. He waived his right to counsel. Of course, the lawyer gives a little bit of pushback. And Lieutenant Kenda is like, no, absolutely not. He doesn't need you.
Sorry, guys. I had to get over and grab my soup really quick. This is my dinner time.
Okay, so where was I? Right, polygraph test. So at this point, he sends the lawyer away and he proceeds to start asking Brett all these questions. Were you there? What'd you do? All these questions you ask a suspect. This man fails on every level, this polygraph test. And so, of course, the detectives are celebrating. We got the guy. This case just opened up and we're already going to close it. They're happy. However, Lieutenant Joe Kenda is not happy. He is no, he didn't do it. This is not our guy. So he sends him home. And he is the lieutenant, so what are you going to do? His people were not happy, but that's what he did. He said he doesn't rely on tests or exams. He relies on looking somebody in the eye. I wish I had that skill. The hospital had called and let them know that Chris had passed away from his injuries. So attempted murder is now actual murder, and the case is now an even bigger deal. They keep searching for 2 days for a gunman with a ponytail. And Joe Kenda realizes, I think I'm relying too heavily on Patricia's description of the gunman. She was obviously wrong about the exact person it was, so maybe we should just scrap the ponytail. They go back to the bar and start questioning people, and they do find out from the bar owner that there is an issue that he had been having with narcotics being dealt in his bar. He has done his best to get rid of it, but some people just won't go away. And by some, he's talking about Donnie the dealer. Donnie the dealer is known for selling weed, and while he doesn't sell in the establishment, he does sell to people in the parking lot. And this man is known to be violent, aggressive, make threats. There were at least 4 different people that have seen him threaten someone and say he'll kill them. So he was definitely known to be violent. And now, as I've already stated, Chris was not a drug user, but Kenda's thinking now is, what if there was a confrontation? What if Chris noticed the dealer was saying something mean or doing something shady, and Chris went up to him, there's a confrontation, and that's when things escalated and he later followed him to his car and killed him. That's what he's thinking at this point. So they call this Donnie guy, Donnie Zellmer, into the station. And when Kenda sees him, he instantly is like, oh my gosh, this man can be Chris's twin. I didn't understand the significance of that until he elaborated. What if this was a case of mistaken identity? What if somebody wanted Donnie dead because of threats that he had made towards them, and they just thought that Donnie was Chris? Now I was like, okay, now I understand why it's important that they look like twins. If this is a case of mistaken identity, these detectives have a lot more work than they originally had, which is disappointing because they thought that they had the guy and come to find out they don't. Anyway, Lieutenant Kenda's feeling frustrated, and he sits down in his office and he's like, all right, this is going to be a lot more work. We're going to have to do this and do that, find out who Donnie's enemies are, who would want him dead, who would mistake Chris for him, all this and that. And while he's sitting at his desk, he receives a random phone call with new information that breaks this case wide open. He gets a call from an attorney, and this attorney states that he has a client that has at least one name that's going to help Lieutenant Joe Kenda on this case. So the attorney gives his client's name. He says, my client is Derek Marlowe. Derek Marlowe is a 20-year-old telemarketer, longtime resident of Colorado Springs. So, of course, the detectives are like, all right, let's go. Let's go talk to him. They go talk to Derek, and he's very open. He starts kind of spilling the beans on everything that he knows. He had been at a party recently, and he heard somebody talk about the shooting specifically. There was a guy at the party who was 24 years old. His name is James Shackelford. This guy was new to the group, and he was important to the group because he's 24 and he's the only one, or one of the only ones, that can buy alcohol for the group. So that's why they had him around at parties. But he was a little crazy. He was an ex-Marine, and he spoke a lot about bragging about violence and saying he wanted to rob the bank, saying he wanted to raid the police station and all this. He was just off his rockers a little bit, this guy. And he starts talking about, another important thing to note is that James jumped houses a lot. He wasn't, I guess homeless, but he didn't have a solid home to live in. So he just hopped around. The night of the shooting, James had said to Derek, hey, let's go steal somebody's car tonight. Let's go, dude. And Derek didn't think anything of it. He's like, yeah, right, dude. Shut up, whatever. And James leaves. Derek didn't think he left to do anything. He just thought he left to leave. It was his time to want to go home or wherever he lives that night. And he gets back to the party and he starts bragging to everybody about how he just shot someone in the neck with a .44 Magnum revolver. He actually brings the gun to the party and starts waving it around, showing everybody what he did. And of course, at this point, he starts making threats, saying, if you guys tell anybody, I will snitch. I just killed someone. Don't think I won't do it again. And he even goes as far as to put a gun to one of the people's head and pulled the trigger. It was empty, but nonetheless terrifying. So everybody started screaming, and the person he pulled the trigger at left. The person he pulled the trigger on, his name was Nate Morano. I don't think that name comes up again, so you guys don't have to remember it, but I did write it down. Nate leaves, he's scared, and Jeffrey is just like, oh, not Jeffrey, James. Jeffrey is another name, though, that we're going to note. Derek also names the gentleman by the name of Jeffrey Kilwitz. He is the closest person to James, and he's actually 18 years old. They would also hang out with a guy named Jeremy Kirby. So at this point, stay with me. We have James, who's like the ringleader. We have Jeremy, who is the new kid we just found out about. And then we have Jeffrey, who's the 18-year-old. I think Jeremy is a minor. I don't know how old he is, but based on something we find out later, he is a minor. So they couldn't really find James because, like I said, he hops homes a lot. So they focused their attention on finding Jeffrey. They're able to find out where Jeffrey lives, and they show up to his house. And at this point, they do have a warrant to search it, but first they're going to talk to him, see what he has to confess, if he even will confess anything. He is just like, deny. I wasn't at a party. I don't even know a James, da-da-da-da. So they're obviously not going to get anything from him. But he also appears really, like, nervous. Remember, he's 20 years old, so if he was murdering somebody or present at a murder, like, he'd be freaking out right about now. So they start searching his house, and within, like, immediately, on top of his dresser, they find 2 live 44s, and in the drawer is a 6-inch 44 revolver unloaded, aka the murder weapon. Detectives turn and see that Jeffrey was, like, waiting at the front door with the door open, and I guess he looked at them and said, like, what happens if I run right now? Which, honestly, it would have been funny if there was a canine unit with them, because the way that I would rather be arrested than to have one of those beasts tackle me down. You guys seen those videos of these dogs? I have one of those dogs. Kita, come. Sit. Sit. Don't embarrass me. Good girl. Look at this. You want to get bit by her? You want to get it? I don't. Ew, did you just burp? Y'all hear that? Anyway, yeah, I would rather get arrested than to get attacked by one of these dogs. But that's what I would have said. I'd be like, you can run, but we're going to catch you and we're going to have one of these take you down. So, don't. He does not run, but that was the first thing I thought of. So I was like, yeah. Anyway. You want to stay here for the whole episode? Okay. I love you too. She normally wears like a pink bandana, but you know, holidays. All right, so now Jeffrey is like, all right, I'm caught. Let me start spilling the beans. So he starts spilling the beans. And he says James is the one that pulled the trigger. James had been struggling with money. He was going on and on about how he had no money. And the intention was to steal somebody's car and sell it, because he had a guy that was offering him $1,000 for a car, but he didn't have a car, so he had to steal it. So they went to this parking lot of this bar, and he's basically looking for a car that he wants. And he decides on the car that was Chris's car, which was a Mitsubishi Eclipse. And so they decided on the car, and they saw, you know, the girl stumbling over, walking to the car. They saw Chris, and that's when they got up. And James walked over. The intention, again, was to steal the car, but he panicked immediately and shot. I don't know if he missed, his finger slipped, or... Kita, I'm kind of in the middle of something. Can you move? Tongue is really... Okay. Is there something on my fingers that you're interested in tasting? Like, did I... Oh, when I was peeling the egg with my hand, I bet you... Okay, that explains it. All right, so anyway, he gives all the information, and he even says that there was a third person there named Jeremy Kirby. So they arrest Jeffrey. They find Jeremy, and he had actually been arrested at a fast food restaurant, and he was in the middle of applying for a job. The only thing about Jeremy, and this is how I know he's a minor, is he couldn't talk to Kenda. So his parents had hired a lawyer on top of the fact that he's a minor, so his parents won't let him talk to him. After that, they they did have a kind of a hard time tracking down James. However, they were able to get in contact with his phone carrier, and the phone carrier revealed that James was at his aunt's house, and he actually was known to going to his aunt's house every time he was like trying to run away from his problems. So that was like an easy find. And all three of them were charged with murder. But check this out. James is the only one that got 16 years. Of the other two, the 18-year-old and the minor, got much longer. And for some reason, James only got 16 years. That to me was very interesting. Because if he's the one that pulled the trigger and he's the one that planned it, what? But that's all they gave me. Yeah, that's it for this episode. I mean, I honestly, that one was... I don't know if they always figure it out as quickly as they make it seem like they do, but this one was pretty quick how they figured it out. But yeah, rest in peace, of course, to Chris, the victim in this case. And at the end, they did have a scene where they were talking about how similar Chris looks to his son, especially because his son obviously grew up and is older now. But yeah, that's the episode for today. I feel like I'm just ending it really abruptly, but my camera's gonna die and I'm really hungry. I will be filming Patreon episodes. If you guys want another episode, you didn't get enough today, feel free to head over to the Patreon. It's $5 a month. There's already like 10 episodes uploaded, including the extra exclusive episode for Jomini Ramsey last week. So yeah, I will see you guys over on the Patreon. If not, that's okay. You guys will hear me next week. Remember, I have another podcast called Chisme and Chill. If you also want to listen to something more about pop culture and reality TV, that's what I talk about there. Other than that, thank you for consuming crime with me today, and you'll hear me next week.